Hi, I'm Matt Henderson. I'm the social media manager for Prime Stage Theater, and I've acted in several Prime Stage shows. I'd like to share with you the opening section of The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. One morning, as Gregor Samsa was waking up from anxious dreams, he discovered that in his bed he had been changed into a monstrous, verminous bug. He lay on his armor-hard back and saw, as he lifted his head up a little, his brown arched abdomen divided up into rigid bow-like sections. His blanket, perched high on his belly, could hardly stay in place. It seemed about to slide off completely. His numerous legs, pitifully thin in comparison to the rest of his circumference, flickered helplessly before his eyes. "What's happened to me?" he thought. It was no dream. His room, a proper room for a human being, only somewhat too small, lay quietly between the four well-known walls. Above the table, on which an unpacked collection of sample cloth goods was spread out, Samsa was a traveling salesman, hung the picture which he had cut out of an illustrated magazine a little while ago and set in a pretty gilt frame. It was a picture of a woman with a fur hat and a fur boa. She sat erect, lifting up in the direction of the viewer a solid fur muff into which her entire forearm had disappeared. Gregor's glance then turned to the window. The dreary weather, you could hear the raindrops falling on the metal window ledge, made him quite melancholy. Why don't I keep sleeping for a little while longer and forget all this foolishness, he thought. But this was entirely impractical, for he was used to sleeping on his right side, and in his present state he could not get himself into this position. No matter how hard he threw himself onto his right side, he always rolled onto his back again. He must have tried it 100 times, closing his eyes so that he would not have to see the wriggling legs, and gave up only when he began to feel a light, dull pain in his side that he had never felt before. "Oh, God," he thought, "what a demanding job I've chosen. Day in, day out on the road. The stresses of selling are much greater than the actual work going on at head office, and in addition to that, I still have to cope with the problems of traveling, the worries about train connections, irregular bad food, temporary and constantly changing human interactions which never come from the heart. To the devil with it all." He felt a slight itching on the top of his abdomen. He slowly pushed himself on his back closer to the bedpost so that he could lift his head more easily, and found the itchy part, which was entirely covered with small white spots. He did not know what to make of them, and wanted to feel the place with a leg, but he retracted it immediately, for the contact felt like a cold shower all over him. He slid back again into his earlier position. "This getting up early," he thought, "makes a man quite idiotic. A man must have his sleep. Other traveling salesmen live like harem women. For instance, when I come back to the inn during the course of the morning to write out the necessary orders, these gentlemen are sitting down to breakfast. If I were to try that with my boss, I'd be fired on the spot. Still, who knows whether that mightn't be really good for me. If it weren't for my parents' sake, I'd have quit ages ago. I would have gone to the boss and told him just what I think from the bottom of my heart. He would have fallen right off his desk." How weird it is for him to sit up at that desk talking down to the employee from way up there. And even more weird because the boss has trouble hearing, so the employee has to step up quite close to him. Anyway, I haven't completely given up that hope yet. Once I've got together the money to pay off my parents' debt to him, that should take another 5 or 6 years, I'll do it for sure. Then I'll make my big break. In any case, right now I have to get up. My train leaves at 5 o'clock. He looked over at the alarm clock ticking away on the chest of drawers. Good God, he thought. It was 6:30, and the hands were going quietly on. It was even past the half hour, already nearly 1:45. Could the alarm have failed to ring? You could see from the bed that it was properly set for 4 o'clock. Certainly it had rung. Yes, but was it possible to sleep peacefully through that noise which made the furniture shake? Now, it is true he had not slept peacefully, but evidently he had slept all the more deeply. Still, what should he do now? The next train left at 7 o'clock. To catch that one, he would have to go in a mad rush. The case of samples was not packed up yet, and he really did not feel particularly bright and lively. And even if he caught the train, there was no avoiding a blow-up with the boss. The firm's errand boy would have waited for the 5 o'clock train and reported the news of his absence long ago. He was the boss's minion, without backbone or intelligence. Well then, what if he reported in sick? But that would be extremely embarrassing and suspicious, because during his 5-year service, Gregor had not been sick even once. The boss would certainly come with a doctor from the health insurance company and would reproach his parents for their lazy son and cut short all objections by asking for the insurance doctor's comments. For this doctor, everyone was completely healthy, but really lazy about work. And besides, would the doctor in this case be totally wrong? Apart from a really excessive drowsiness after the long sleep, Gregor, in fact, felt quite well and even had a really strong appetite. As he was thinking all this over in the greatest haste without being able to make the decision to get out of bed, the alarm clock was indicating exactly 7:15. There was a cautious knock on the door by the head of the bed. "Gregor," a voice called. It was his mother. "It's 7:15. Do you want to be on your way?" That soft voice. Gregor was startled when he heard his own voice answering. It was clearly and unmistakably the voice he'd had before, but in it was intermingled, as if from below, an irrepressible, painful squeaking, which left the words positively distinct only in the first moment, and distorted them in the reverberation, so that anyone listening did not know if he had heard correctly. Gregor wanted to answer in detail and explain everything, but in these circumstances he confined himself to saying, Yes, thank you, Mother. I'm getting up right away." Because of the wooden door, the change in Gregor's voice was not really noticeable outside, so his mother calmed down with this explanation and shuffled off. Gregor had no intention of opening the door. He congratulated himself on his precaution, acquired from traveling, of locking all doors during the night, even at home. He said to himself, "Before it strikes 7:15, whatever happens, I must be completely out of bed. Besides, by then, someone from the office will arrive to inquire about me, because the office will open before 7 o'clock. And he made an effort, then, to rock his entire body length out of the bed with a uniform motion. If he let himself out of the bed in this way, his head, which in the course of the fall he intended to lift up sharply, would probably remain uninjured. His back seemed to be hard. Nothing would really happen to that as a result of the fall onto the carpet. His greatest reservation was a worry about the loud noise which the fall must create, and which presumably would arouse, if not fright, then at least concern on the other side of all the doors. Nevertheless, he had to take that chance. He got to the point where, by rocking more strongly, he was making it very difficult for himself to keep his balance, and very soon he would finally have to make a final decision, for in 5 minutes it would be 7:15. Then there was a ring at the door of the apartment. "That's someone from the office," he told himself, and he almost froze while his small limbs only danced around all the faster. For one moment, everything remained still. "They aren't opening the door," Gregor said to himself, caught up in some absurd hope. But of course then, as usual, the servant girl, with her firm tread, went to the door and opened it. Gregor needed to hear only the first word of the visitor's greeting to recognize immediately who it was, the manager himself. Why was Gregor the only one condemned to work in a firm where the slightest lapse would arouse the greatest suspicion? Were all the employees collectively one and all scoundrels? Among them was there then no truly devoted person who, if he failed to use just a couple of hours in the morning for office work, would become abnormal from pangs of conscience and really be in no state to get out of bed? Would it not have been enough to let an apprentice make inquiries if such questioning was even necessary? Must the manager himself come, and in the process must it be demonstrated to the entire innocent family that the investigation of this suspicious circumstance could be entrusted only to the intelligence of the manager? More as a consequence of the excited state in which this idea put Gregor than as a result of any actual decision, he swung himself with all his might out of bed. There was a loud thud, but not a real crash. The fall was absorbed somewhat by the carpet, and in addition his back was more elastic than Gregor had thought. For that reason, the dull noise was not quite so conspicuous. But he had not held his head up with sufficient care, and had bumped it. He turned his head, irritated and in pain, and rubbed it on the carpet. "Something has fallen in there," said the manager in the next room on the left. Gregor tried to imagine himself whether anything similar to what was happening to him today could have also happened at some point to the manager. At least one had to concede the possibility of such a thing. However, as if to give a rough answer to this question, the manager now, with a squeak of his polished boots, took a few determined steps in the next room. From the neighboring room on the right, the sister was whispering to inform Gregor, "Gregor, the manager is here." "I know," said Gregor to himself, but he did not dare make his voice loud enough so that his sister could hear. That's the end of this first section of the Metamorphosis. If you like that, I highly recommend reading the book. Thanks for watching, and have a great day, guys.